and welcome to this forest painting watercolor for beginners tutorial. We're going to go from this to this in under 8 minutes, so stay tuned. Right, so we're going to start with a nice thick piece of watercolor paper. I've chosen a 230 GSM here. You can go higher and you can go lower, but I wouldn't go lower than 200 GSM. And what I'm doing here is obviously masking the paper down so that when we wet the paper, it's not going to buckle. And there, I'm choosing a nice brush for this. Going to start with a bit of green and a bit of yellow in the corner. I'm going to have the light coming in from the top left hand corner, so that I've used a little blob of yellow and I'm blending it with some green because we're doing a forest scene with some rays of light, as you can see there, and a bit of yellow as well, making sure your paper's moist. So just go over your paper with water before you begin layering on the color. Okay, so you can see I have done some rays of light there. Now I'm going in with some foliage. I'm using a darker green to give it some depth. And watercolor is amazing because, you know, it just does its own thing, goes in its own direction. There I'm using a fan brush to do some of the foliage, and here I'm taking that fan brush as well and just sort of stippling the paper with dots. You do that by, you know, getting your paintbrush nice and moist with the color on, and then you knock the brush over the watercolor paper. Just gives a nice effect. And then I'm trying to blend in a bit more. A bit more foliage going in, darker colors now, giving it some depth. You're going to want a nice sable brush or something like that that holds water, retains the water. I'm not, obviously, if those of you know me, I'm not actually a watercolor artist primarily. I have dabbled in watercolor, but I am actually an acrylic and mixed media artist, so this is not my comfort zone, but I do like doing watercolors. It's different and it's relaxing. I find it's a little bit more devil-may-care. You can see, you know, how the watercolor reacts with the water and different colors, and it kind of does its own thing. You can have fun and you can play with it. And there I'm putting in some different tones of the green. As you can see, the foliage in the forest is now coming together, putting a little bit more definition in the sky, a little bit more yellow hues and greens. I wanted to make it really pop. I'm not a very wishy-washy watercolor artist. I do, because I paint in acrylic, I do very bright things. So as you can see, I'm also doing quite bright watercolors. Each to their own. You can make it lighter if you prefer a more pastel look to your watercolor. And there I'm just putting in blobs of green and letting it just spread out, letting the water do its thing and experiment, have fun. That's going to sort of become the backdrop to the trees. There goes in, there goes in. There goes a tree into the painting. So for that I'm using like a nice sort of forest green. Putting in some branch details. There's no right or wrong in this. Trees are all different, so don't get too hung up on branches and what goes where. Just have fun with it and do what looks right. Now I'm putting a darker tree trunk there because now as we come more into the foreground, it's going to be darker. So the trees that are closest to where the light's coming in on the top left, they're going to be a lighter green. And like there we go. It's going to be a lighter green to the forest green I've used as you get closer to the light, and then as you get closer to the foreground, it's going to be darker, just to make it all pop. Look how it pops. One of the watercolor paintings that I have done in the past is actually my best-selling print, and I'm not a watercolor artist. So this painting over here, you can see in the left-hand part of your screen, it's called Dusk Tree of Life, and this is actually my best-selling art print of all time, and it's a watercolor, and I'm an acrylic artist. Go figure. Okay, so going in to those background trees with a little bit more definition, a little bit of a darker green there. Filling in some details. More trees the better. It's a forest after all. Branches. And just remember, if you feel like it, you can actually go over, once it's dry, you can go over something like this with ink, pens. Sky's the limit. I like mixed media. Putting in some birds there. I love my birds. Got to put in the birds. Got to be birds in the trees. Okay, now it's time to reveal. I've let it dry, obviously. And there we go. Nice clean white border. Look at that board. It's disgusting. That's my cutting board. You can see it's had a lot of years of life. Looks like a Jackson Pollock. Okay, so I put my watercolor painting down and penciled out onto the backing board. Now I'm cutting it with a Stanley knife on a nice hard piece of hardboard. Nice messy piece of hardboard. Okay, so that's the backing done, and now I'm going to take some cellophane, little packet. You can buy these at the art store. Pop it in there to protect it. It also looks nice if you're selling it. Nice and professional. And yeah. Make sure it's nice and tight and that there's no dust or floaty things in the packet. Nothing worse than having some dust getting in there against that white. Okay, so now I'm taking some sellotape, making sure it's nice and tight, and there we go, nice professional looking watercolor. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please do subscribe if you haven't already and hit the bell for notifications. I bring out a lot of these art tutorials, and yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.